So the solenoid attaches to the battery. What you've got in this scenario is we've got a cable directly from the battery, and that bolts onto the solenoid, the top of the solenoid there. I've got a second heavy battery cable that actually goes to the other side of the tractor, and that's for like an intake manifold heater to help preheat the air when you're trying to start this machine up. So that's just a direct connection essentially to the other side via this battery cable, so they share the same terminal. I've got one orange wire that goes on the terminal closest to the engine block, and then I've got one more wire here that goes on the start side of the solenoid to activate it. And this is one last line, which I believe is the charging wire from the alternator that also shares that top post with everybody else. So the bottom post is the switched power into the starter itself. And I was getting lots of smoke coming out of the windings of the starter. I think a lot of it has to do with the age, and also there's poor battery cable conditions. So this starter is 3 bolts, and we should be able to pull it out. And there's a shim in there as well, so we're gonna make sure that that shim is saved. All right, so that's the 3rd bolt, and it appears as though the fuel line is in the way to get this out all of the way, which is fine because it has to come apart regardless to get cleaned. So this filter is the last filter in the fuel system before the high pressure pump. Kind of interesting. So the top has a bleeder on it and a gasket. The filter itself is just a straight through style fuel filter. That whole canister is what it is, and a bottom seal as well. Now if we look inside, there's a lot of crud on the bottom. There's definitely dirt and sediment in this fuel, and I'm sure that that has a lot to do with the issues that I'm having with fuel delivery. So taking this filter mount completely out is my best thought, and that way I can completely clean it with brake clean and prep it for a new filter, make sure that it's going to be all right. So I managed to remove the starter, and I removed the entire fuel filter, the last fuel filter in the system. 2 through bolts on this plate hold the base down, and then the entire thing comes apart. Looks like a copper line in feed to that filter, and then it was some form of really brittle flexible line going into the high pressure pump. Currently I've got the glass bowl on the bottom of the fuel tank removed, and I'm draining it into my catch underneath the tractor there. On this side of the engine block, the main fuel line comes into a canister filter located here, and I've also got that removed currently. Goes through a manual pump this is a mechanical pump driven from the engine that feeds the high pressure pump on the other side of the engine. So now I'm basically waiting for the fuel to drain because the tank is pretty gnarly inside. So at this point it makes sense to flush everything and get it all fresh and new. There's the starter. And let me tell you, this is a heavy one, but it's a big machine. This is the second filter with the base plate there that's all full of crud. That's the one I was talking about that's all dirty. This is the first filter It actually, it's a steel container that stays with it, but it almost looks like a ball of twine wound around a steel shaft with some holes penetrated in it for fuel flow. Kind of cool. I'm going to hit up the parts store and see if they have any of the filters that I'm looking for. Happen to have them in stock or can get them, because that would be helpful if they could. And then we're going to go from there. But for now, I think we're going to leave it like this. Let that fuel drain out. And we'll move on to the next project here once I get more parts. Alright, so this is the following day. A heck of a lot nicer day today. I've got the air compressor out here. So what I want to do is I want to blow air backwards through the drain valve on the bottom of the fuel tank and try to stir up everything that might be in there to help get it drain out and hopefully clean out this fuel system. The next thing I want to do is open up some of these fuel lines and blow air backwards through them, again back toward the tank area, to try to flush out any sediment that might be in those lines, and I'm suspecting that there's probably quite a bit of it in there. So we're going to work on that today. I used compressed air, a combination of compressed air and gravity, and I've been able to empty the fuel tank entirely. I ended up putting a bit of rubber line on the bottom of the fuel tank where that glass ball normally fits on. There's a small little stub of pipe coming out, and a rubber hose with a gear clamp fit on there well. And then I put my air hose on the end of that, put the cap on the tank, and was able to basically pressurize the tank with my air compressor, and then remove the air compressor and have the fuel sort of forced out through some air pressure that was still remaining in the tank there, to help flush out any debris that might have been around. So pushing backwards and causing a big bubbling effect inside, stirring all that stuff up, getting it floating, and then moving it out. So that is all done. I've used compressed air, and I've blasted back through just about every line that I could get access to. Hopefully I've removed any plugs or anything that might have been hiding in there that I couldn't get my hands on. What else have I done here today? I redid the heater solenoid that was all busted and broken. The old one is sitting right here. When I tried to remove it, the stud just broke right out. It's not that it didn't work, it was just really not 100% healthy anymore. So I had a solenoid that I had used previously just for a little while in good condition. The only problem is I had removed the mounting bracket from it. So I've got that on the tractor now, but what I did is I chiseled the old mounting bracket off of the old solenoid and just gave this a couple tack welds and welded it to the newer solenoid. So now everybody's tied back together. So that's going to function and be a heck of a lot safer because it's not just floating and loose anymore. So that's a good thing. I think I've already said I've got my filters on order, my fuel filters. So those should be in on Wednesday. Today's Monday. So I'll have those filters and I'll be able to hook the fuel system back up. Yesterday, my starter, I dropped it off, and later on at the end of the day, the thing had been rebuilt. So new starter's installed. I still have the old power cable to it. I re-smashed the crimps on the end, made them a little tighter, cleaned them up with a file to try to get a little bit more life out of them. My intention is to replace that wire with new, and I kind of rerouted it in a little bit of a better fashion. It's not jammed under the floor plate anymore. New fuel filter on this side, although it doesn't look like it because I just bled the system and got diesel all over it again. New filter on the other side inside the canister. Looks like I got a slow drip coming out of there now. I'll have to snug that up. I just noticed this. Okay, I'll tighten that up right now. Alright, so I tightened that fuel bowl, the glass bowl underneath there, but if it keeps dripping, I might just have to get a gasket for it. I think it was just a cork gasket, so it's not a surprise if it was to leak. I just checked for dead short on the positive, and I don't appear to have it. And a good thing. No sparks. So we should be okay to hook that up, and then crank the machine up and give it a try. So let me hook this terminal up here. All right, we are all cranked up. That's tight. The ground is tight. This terminal is tight. So let's go turn the key and see if we've got measurable current flow to the heater, and then nothing burns up. The heater's right there. That's that solenoid that I had replaced with a new one. So let me get my butt up there. We've got an amp meter on the dash. Looks like there's a draw of some kind happening there. So that preheats the incoming air. Certainly sounds like it's working. All right, that sounds a lot healthier. Here's to hoping that she's gonna start up. So I'm running that heater. Usually about 30 seconds or so is what they require me to do. Once I get some high pressure fuel, I'll have to check the other side and see if we're leaking at all. Hopefully we're not. Oh jeez. This battery is junk. Alright, I'm not gonna mess with it. I'm gonna get the other battery. Time for a replacement. Maybe I can boost it with the van. Let me get some cables and see. So I've got jumper cables to the van right now, but I'm really, to be honest, kind of quite doubtful that we're even going to get this started. I think there's two problems, and I think the first one is this battery. Even though it's a big battery, I think it's grossly undersized for the machine here that we're trying to start up. I'd love to know if the cold cranking amp rating is even on there, or doesn't look like it is. If it is, it's not there anymore. But I can say that right now we're charging 15 amps, 15 and a half amps from the vehicle, from the van. When I hit the inline heater, when it's cold, when it hasn't run yet, I'm at like a 200 amp draw. There we go, you can see 200 amps right there. So then by the time I'm ready to hit the starter after running that for 30 seconds, I don't have hardly any capacity left to even turn the starter. Starter's not even warm yet, thankfully. And power cable's a bit toasty, but to be expected. That's a lot of power draw. Let's see when I hit the starter what happens. Yeah, I saw 260, I saw 270. That's a lot of power. A lot of demand. But it's cranking good. It's cranking really good when the battery's in primo condition.